The Biden administration has decided to send cluster bombs to Ukraine. What are cluster bombs? A lot of people don't know what it is. And the moment that any novel or somewhat obscure concept hits the headlines, all of a sudden everybody's an expert on it. They're all armchair experts who, attended Naval War College or something like that. Cluster bombs are a particularly dangerous type of munition that will blanket a space with explosives that have a fairly high fail rate. And so what that means is, if you drop a bunch of cluster munitions all over the countryside, a lot of them might not go off. And so even years after the close of a conflict, you're gonna have a lot of civilians and farmers and travelers getting blown up by these kinds of munitions. This is why Jen Psaki, last year as White House press secretary, suggested that cluster bombs might constitute a war crime.
There are reports of illegal cluster bombs and vacuum bombs being used by the Russians. If that's true, what is the next step of this administration, and is there a red line for how much violence will be tolerated against civilians in this manner that's illegal and potentially a war crime?
It would be. I don't have any confirmation of that. We have seen the reports. If that were true, it would potentially be a war crime. Obviously, there are a range of international fora that would assess that. So certainly we would look to that to be a part of that conversation.
So cluster bombs intrinsically might constitute a war crime. And when Jen Psaki was asked about that, it was in the context, the hypothetical of Russia using cluster bombs. Oh yes, that might very well be a war crime. Now we are sending cluster bombs to Ukraine. That's not. Either Joe Biden is admitting that he's a war criminal, or we're saying, no, when we do it, it's not a war crime. And the most honest liberals, the most honest proponents of the war in Ukraine are going to make that argument. They're going to say it's a war crime when Russia does this type of thing, but it's not a war crime when America does this type of thing. And it's probably going to be a difficult argument to make, but maybe somebody can make it. We need that kind of clarity. This has been a major shift in politics in my lifetime. It's been a reckoning with American foreign policy that was pretty much on autopilot since World War II. And finally now, people on the left and on the right are beginning to look at it a little bit more consciously. Donald Trump did a lot of that. Donald Trump was the first major Republican presidential candidate in my lifetime who said the war in Iraq was a bad idea. Now, you might defend George Bush in the war in Iraq. You might say, well, he didn't know. Our intelligence told us that Saddam Hussein was producing weapons of mass destruction. The intelligence community got it wrong, this, that, or the other thing. You might say it was the right decision to be made at the time, albeit perhaps on bad information. Some people, some of the real hardcore neocons, will still defend it even with the bad information. But when you look at the war in Iraq, it was the United States aggressing, right? We invaded a country based on what turned out to be a mostly false pretext. When you look at Libya, the invasion of Libya, with the support of NATO in Iraq and in Libya, we just invaded a country because we didn't like what they were doing. Libya wasn't threatening the United States. Libya wasn't threatening NATO nations. This wasn't an Article 5 invasion. We just went in because we didn't like the guy. We invaded that country. Now fast forward to the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin's justification for invading Ukraine was that Ukraine is cozying up to NATO. Ukraine wants to join NATO. NATO's going to let them in. By the way, that's happening now. There's a major push to let Ukraine into NATO. And there's a major push to let Ukraine into the European Union and all the rest of it. And Putin said, we can't tolerate this. We can't have NATO right up on our border, especially in the breadbasket of Europe, Ukraine, because NATO is an aggressive organization that seeks to harm Russia's national interest. Now, all the NATO supporters said, well, that's not true. NATO is a defensive alliance. We're only here to defend ourselves. We would never start a war. We would never aggress. We would never invade without a sufficient predicate for invasion. And then Vladimir Putin can point to Libya. And then Vladimir Putin can point to Iraq. Vladimir Putin can point to Kuwait. Vladimir Putin can point to all sorts of places and say, or Kosovo rather, and say, no, you guys have been aggressors. You guys have been a little more active than you're pretending to have been. And NATO doesn't have very much to say about that. it's a healthy thing to ask every once in a while, are we the baddies? I don't think necessarily we are. You've got to have that healthy sense. And this is why, by the way, the Trump side of the GOP scored. This is why Barack Obama beat Hillary Clinton, because Barack Obama opposed the war in Iraq. Hillary still defended the war in Iraq. There is a major, not just left or right, it's a populist movement that is reconsidering American foreign policy. And so you've got the many people who are opposed to foreign adventurism versus the elite, who have a lot more political influence than the many. This is why Tucker Carlson, who's the most prominent member, was, until he got fired, was the most prominent populist on cable television, and they fired him probably because he was a little too populist. He's the most popular guy in the history of cable news. He was the one articulating this view. Maybe we shouldn't be engaging in so much foreign adventurism. If you liked the sound of that, you are going to love the taste of Magic Spoon even more. With Magic Spoon, you can say goodbye to bland, sugary cereals and experience breakfast like never before, packed with high-quality ingredients and flavors that you already know and love, like cocoa, fruity frosted, and peanut butter, which is very, very tasty. Magic Spoon will take your breakfast game to new heights. My producer, Ben Davies, can't stop talking about how much he loves Magic Spoon's peanut butter cereal. To which I say, hey, you jerk, stop stealing the peanut butter cereal from the office and let me have it instead. But he loves it. He really likes it. So I figure I'll throw the guy a bone. He can have the box of peanut butter. I'll save myself for the other. Magic Spoon cereals have 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein, and are only 140 calories per serving. They're also gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free. Experience the magic of Magic Spoon cereals by visiting magicspoon.com/Knowles and get $5 off your order. Magic Spoon is so confident in their product, they back it with a 100% happiness guarantee. If you don't like it for any reason, they will refund your money. What are you waiting for? Click the link below or head over to magicspoon.com/Knowles to grab a variety pack. Try it today. magicspoon.com/Knowles for $5 off your order. Major pop culture story that I am being forced to know about, because that's how social media works. I barely know who Jonah Hill is. I did not know that Jonah Hill and Seth Rogen were different people until about 3 years ago. And they're different people now. Seth Rogen's a huge lib. Jonah Hill, I assume, is a big lib too. But I actually think, based on the leaked text messages that are creating a huge Hollywood tempest in a teapot, Jonah Hill might be one of the most normal people in Hollywood. What came out was a series of private text messages leaked by Jonah Hill's ex-girlfriend, portraying him as an emotionally abusive monster. This after Jonah Hill announces that he's had a baby with his girlfriend. So he's not married. He should marry his girlfriend. They've just had a baby, and this ex-girlfriend of something like 2 years ago releases text messages. And this is what she says is an example of emotional abuse. Jonah texts her and says, quote, "Plain and simple, if you need surfing with men, boundaryless, inappropriate friendships with men, to model, to post pictures of yourself in a bathing suit, to post sexual pictures, friendships with women who are in unstable places and from your wild recent past beyond getting a lunch or coffee or something respectful, I'm not the right partner for you. If these things bring you to a place of happiness, I support it and there will be no hard feelings. These are my boundaries for romantic partnership. My boundaries with you based on the ways these actions have hurt our trust." That's it. That's the example of an emotionally abusive man. This is one of the most mature romantic treatises I've read in our entire popular media. It's not perfect. I don't like the idea of talking about romance as a partnership. We're in a partnership, and I don't like the idea of divorcing romance from the end of marriage and children and all the rest of it. But what he's saying here is, yeah, look, if you want to have boundaryless, inappropriate friendships with men, I don't like that. I'm going to be a little bit jealous, just as you would be jealous of me if I were had inappropriate, boundaryless relationships with women. And I don't like the idea that you've got to post skimpy pictures of yourself on the internet. If you want to do that, you can go do that. I won't be angry at you, but that's not going to work for me. And if we're going to move towards something like marriage, I just don't want my wife to be doing that. And I don't want you to put yourself in the near occasion of sin. And I wouldn't do that myself either. And I'm not yelling at you. I'm not being angry. I'm not threatening you in any way. You can go your own way. It'll be totally fine. I'm just telling you that's where I am. That's very reasonable. That's the only thing that he hasn't done is he should man up even further and say, by the way, this is my framework not only for a relationship, but for marriage. And then we can get married and we can do what married couples do and we can have kids and have a nice family and it'll be a good life. Totally right. She responds to all of this and she says, I hope my ex, Jonah Hill, has a daughter. Maybe she'll turn him into a real feminist because the fact that he calls himself a feminist now is laughable. And that's the one part she's right about. Jonah Hill is obviously not a feminist. He might pretend to be a feminist. He might dress up like a lib and use the language of a lib, but he's not. He's not a feminist. He's a relatively normal guy. His ex-girlfriend obviously is a feminist. Feminism is wrong. You should reject it. Men, women, anybody in between that supposedly exists nowadays, reject it. It's just the problem with feminism is not that it gives women too much power or whatever. Feminism doesn't give women any power. It deprives women of their power. It's just wrong. The problem with feminism, as is the problem with so many modern ideologies, is that it posits a false anthropology, a false conception of human nature. And so when conservatives inveigh against feminism, it's not because we hate women, quite the opposite. It's because we love women. And it doesn't even come from any sort of passion or any sort of personal desire or anything like that. It comes from a rational deduction and empirical observation of human nature and saying, oh, feminism says a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. Feminism says that women and men are pretty much the same. And I just know that that isn't true. And so if you pursue feminism, you're going to be miserable and unhappy, like Jonah Hill's ex-girlfriend. And if you don't pursue feminism and you pursue normal life and you recognize that the sexes are complementary rather than indiscernible, you're going to have a better life. Who seems to be doing better right now, Jonah Hill or the ex-girlfriend? I rest my case. Boy, what a great clip that was. Make sure that you ring that bell. Subscribe to the Michael Knowles YouTube channel. Don't miss a single clip or vid or interview or game or anything. See you next time.